everyone born from a donor might have siblings they had no idea existed, who were born from the same stranger. Here, a man gets instant results putting his DNA on websites. That's the summary for episode 1 of Born from the Same Stranger, a primetime documentary which aired on ITV1 earlier this month. Raking in millions of viewers, the 4-part docuseries was a hit, with critics and audiences alike. Liam Renouf was the star of that episode. Born and raised in St Clement, he now lives in London. But on a recent trip back to his home island, he took the time to speak with us about growing up as a donor-conceived person, his experience on the show, his newly found donor siblings, and what sparked his decision to find out, or not find out, more about his donor. Why don't you begin by telling me your name, your age, and what you do for a living?
So my name's Liam Renouf, I'm 28, and I am a teacher based in Hackney, East London.
Brilliant. And you were born and raised here?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Jersey. I went to university at 18 in London, kind of never left. But yeah, born and raised here.
Just to start, so have you always known that you were donor conceived, or is this something that, did you have a conversation with it about it at a particular age where you were sat down and kind of talked about it?
So yeah, I've always known that I'm donor conceived. I grew up with a single mother, so it was kind of quite difficult to hide it. Yeah, it's always been kind of a part of my life, a part of my identity. I think what I didn't realise when I was younger is that it wasn't that common. So I remember when we started learning kind of the basics of biology, and I was like, oh yeah, but you can just go to a clinic. And I kind of thought that maybe you reached a certain age where you wanted a kid and you made a choice of going to a clinic or having a child naturally. I'm not sure I like the term naturally, because I think that the way that I was conceived was incredibly natural. But yeah, so yeah, I didn't think that I grasped how uncommon it was. When I was a bit younger, my mum went on the Vanessa show, and then that kind of picked up some tabloid and magazine stories. So I had those to read through. I think I was born in 95 and that was in 98. So yeah, we were in a few sort of tabloid.
How did you
things.
find that, sort of already being in national media?
I mean, I can't really remember it at the time. If you go back to it, it's very 90s, I think you've got to remember that at the time, especially in the UK, the kind of, quote, villainous scapegoats were single mothers and same-sex couples. So we're dealing with the backdrop of Section 28, which is a piece of legislation that said that you couldn't basically in schools promote homosexuality as an accepted lifestyle, and single mothers were kind of the idea of like the single mother, scrounger, amoral, absent father. These two things were really, really embedded in kind of the British psyche. So this decision that my mum made to do it alone, and lots and lots of people that went to the same clinic that my mum did that were same-sex couples kind of do it alone, was a really big and brave decision to make, because yeah, the 90s was, although it wasn't that long ago, it was a very, very kind of different time.
So as you were growing up, did you experience any stigma or anything like that, or was Jersey quite accepting when you were younger and sort of growing up in this family?
No, I didn't really experience any stigma. I had quite a few people that were interested. It doesn't really come up in the day-to-day conversation.
I guess, yeah.
So I remember when I was in secondary school, and again, it was a bit further on, but we were doing biology, and we learned about IVF. I wasn't actually conceived by IVF, I was conceived by donor insemination. but we learned about IVF, and I kind of explained my story, and I think people were quite interested.
So you've spoken about how growing up in Jersey as well, there was quite a strong community, and that might have been part of the reason that you were never sort of really aware of the fact that you maybe didn't know everything about sort of where you came from.
I think I was always aware that there was this other person out there that obviously I share 50% of my DNA with. I grew up 2 doors down from my grandparents. I was incredibly close to my grandfather, and I grew up next door to my uncle and aunt. So I definitely felt, it didn't really feel like just being brought up by a single mother. I was brought up by lots and lots of people in my family that surrounded me. And yeah, I definitely felt a strong link growing up to Jersey and to the community of Jersey. My grandfather was quite kind of known and active in his community. My family have been here for a very, very long time, and you know, I can go to a graveyard and see my great grandparents or whatever. So I felt this affinity to Jersey. I think when I moved to London, that was probably the point that I started questioning it a little bit more.
What was it that made you question it? Was it being around other people or in a different atmosphere?
I don't know. I think it was maybe it wasn't going to London, maybe it just happened that when I moved, the commercial DNA testing became more popular. And I kind of thought, well, I've got to at least try and find out something, because I don't want to get to the end of my life and kind of regret not finding something out. So yeah, I didn't kind of consistently act on it. I think for some donor conceived people, and completely rightly so, it becomes a real driving force in their lives. That wasn't really me. I think when I first started finding out more distant cousins, when I first got those DNA results, when I started finding more distant cousins and stuff, I tried to kind of match things up, and I made an absolute hash of it and kind of thought, oh, these people could be my grandparents. They weren't. And I kind of got a bit more into it. I also think finding the donor conceived community pages on social media massively kind of drove me forward, because I kind of found out at that time what more information I could get, and that kind of drove me forward. And I saw these stories of people that had met siblings, met their donor, kind of forged these relationships, and lots of the time how much joy that had brought them. And obviously I had also stories of rejection and of not finding anything and really difficult things. I was obviously really lucky that I grew up knowing. I think, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think for some people that maybe don't grow up knowing and they find out, that different emotions that are holding can kind of drive that as well. But yeah, I just wanted to give it a go, really.
So you ended up on an ITV documentary, which was, you sort of featured heavily in the first episode. In that documentary, you go on a search for your half-siblings, and you do find, is it 3 or 4 of them? 3?
4 of them.
4 of them.
Three are in the show, but there are 4
Fantastic.
of them. Yeah.
And so why don't you just really briefly, because I don't know if listeners are familiar with some of the sort of the terms that you use. So these are half-siblings, and then you say donor conceived. Are there any other words that we should know about that I'm getting?
Yeah, so I would use, for my biological father, I would use the word sperm donor. Some people would use the word donor siblings. I would use the word half siblings, but I'm starting to form really good relationships with my half siblings. So for me personally, I would refer to them as my brothers and sisters, but that's only because I'm forming these these kind of bonds with them. But yeah, I think even words like biological father, biological child, half sibling, half brother, half sister, I think those words can be quite loaded and hold quite a lot of kind of inferred responsibility. So I tend to personally stick with donor, sperm donor, donor siblings. There isn't like a dictionary of exact terms. Well, I haven't seen one, maybe there is.
No, that's really good, because I think language is so important in how you talk about it.
Yeah, I agree.
So how did you become involved with the documentary? You mentioned you became involved with some social media sites and pages, and was it through them, or how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I joined some social media pages, initially because it was, when I first joined them, people would kind of put up the info that they knew about their donor, and then kind of see, oh, I was conceived at this clinic, this is what I've got, does this match anyone's? And then one of the Facebook pages I was part of, which is called Donor Conceive UK, which has now become an organisation, absolutely amazing people, I saw an advert on there for the show Born from the Same Stranger. And it was by the people that made Long Lost Family. And I kind of thought, well, I'll give it a go, I'll apply. My feelings initially towards it were very transactional. I kind of thought, okay, they are going to give me quite expensive genealogy work for free. Am I that fussed about being on telly? Not really. But as the process kind of went on, I really enjoyed it. And the actual producers that made the producers of the show were amazing people, and I've got a lot to thank them for. You know, they did this amazing work and they looked after me incredibly, and I couldn't imagine doing it without them, you know. So I applied in November, December 22, and then I had an initial phone call with one of the producers, and she said, that's really interesting. And then I went through a kind of a second round. I spoke to someone else, and then they said, yeah, we'd love to have you on the show. What I really thought was really amazing about the show is that before I did it, I had to have an assessment with a counsellor, and throughout all of the process, a counsellor was available, which was fantastic. So yeah, that was it. I kind of got told that I was through just before Christmas. And then in the January they sent me the filming dates, and then we had filming dates across 2023. So yeah, it was, I think the first filming was in May, but that was kind of the process. It was quite quick, quite easy. I didn't really expect to find anything, to be honest. You know, I've been on one of the DNA sites for quite a while, and I thought, yeah, probably won't find anything, but I'll give it a go.
And of course you did find some things out. So
I did, yeah.
How was the experience? Did you find it quite an emotional experience in the end?
Yeah, I did. I absolutely did. So one thing that you don't, if you watch the show, one thing I don't think you can really tell is that there's the scene where I go to the clinic and I get shown a statement that was written by my donor. I had no idea that statement existed. The only information that my mum had been given was his profession. So I think that was the first day of filming, if I'm right. So I had 3 days of filming in a row. So I had done some filming in my flat in the morning. Then I went to get this statement, and I was like, oh my God, you know, if this is it, if this is all we have, then this is perfect. And then the next day, they came to my flat, and so they had, basically the way that it kind of worked is they did the DNA tests, and then they kept the passwords, because obviously they didn't want me to check in on the things. They could actually get my reaction on camera. And I logged in to the first one, and it said, you have a half-sister. I was like, oh my God. And then the second one I logged into, it said, on it said first cousin. And I was like, oh, first cousin, amazing. And then when I actually clicked on it, it said likely relationships, half brother, and then there was a couple of others. And I was like, oh my God, that's a half brother. So interestingly, one of my siblings, May, her DNA had actually only been uploaded to the site the night before we started filming. So the producers spent all night kind of Googling and researching and kind of seeing information. So then I Googled May, and I found out that May had a brother from the same donor. And then I was like, okay, this is quite a lot to process. So I sent them a couple of messages, which was difficult. I had to be really delicate.
How was that first sort of approach? Did you feel hesitant? Or?
I did, because I didn't know if they were sperm donor children, if they were the children of my donor that they've been brought up with.
Okay.
I didn't know whether they knew they were sperm donor children. I think May was a bit easier, because I think May had something on her profile that said like conceived by anonymous donor. So I was like, okay. But I had to tread really carefully, like this is really big news for someone, and it's a really strange feeling to think that this is a stranger, but they're my sibling, my half sibling, and it's a really intense experience. There's no guides of how to do it. But yeah, I dropped them a couple of messages, and then I had to go that afternoon I had to go see the genealogist, and the genealogist had used all of my matches to find out about family trees, and were like, and here's your donor. So that was all in one day. So I was a bit like, when I got home, I was like, oh my God. So I got a reply from them the next day, and then Charlie said, got a bit of news for you. I have a sister called Beth, who is also conceived by the same donor. And that was on the Wednesday. I'd got those messages back. We started a group chat, and then on the Monday we met up. It was all so quick.
Wow. So how was that experience meeting them? Because you've mentioned it was quite an odd moment, because you noticed some similarities in traits and sort of looks and things like that.
Yeah, it was quite odd. I think I used the word surreal about 6 times in the show. I couldn't really think of any other word to use. It was odd. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was one of the best days of my life. Noticing the similar traits was amazing, but I guess somewhat expected. There was a few things that surprised me. So kind of having similar mannerisms, that surprised me. Yeah.
What, just like in the way that you sort of...
Yeah, so we all kind of rubbed our chin at the same time. Wow. And yeah, there were definitely kind of similarities in mannerisms. I've always thought, I guess you look for what you know, but my family have quite a strong family resemblance. And I've always seen the family that I've known all my life in me, I look really similar to my granddad, I look quite similar to my uncle. We all kind of have a resemblance. But when I met them, there were little things that, like my nose, that we all have exactly the same nose. And we saw a picture of our paternal grandmother and our donor, and they have the same nose. So those sort of things that I was like, wow, amazing. We all have blue eyes, we all have brown hair. I think the thing that I found the most surprising was this instant care and love towards them, this instant comfort towards them, which really, really, really kind of knocked me back a little bit. I didn't expect it. I hoped that maybe some friendships would grow out of it, but I didn't expect it to be that instant. And it was just like instantly I was like, oh my God, I really care about these people. And yeah, that was the most amazing bit, I think.
So how has your perception both of yourself and even, being someone who is donor conceived, how has that changed since doing the show and finding your donor siblings?
My family has grown. I'm really enjoying nurturing the relationships with my siblings. it's a real privilege for them to allow me to come into their lives and to build these relationships. I think that little kind of tingling feeling of I wonder has disappeared. Not that I ever kind of had any severe anguish with it, but I think that kind of little feeling has been turned off. And yeah, I'm just really, really, really enjoying exactly where I am right now. Every time I meet up with them, it's really nice. I feel really present. I feel really able to kind of just, really enjoy myself and just sort of think this is really important. So that's really nice.
No, that's lovely. And have you received any feedback following the show airing from anyone or from the donor-conceived community or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. There's been a bit of feedback. I'm not sure the exact numbers, so I won't quote the exact numbers, but there has been a significant increase in donors lifting their anonymity since it's aired. I've had a couple of messages from donor-conceived people that are kind of thinking about starting their journey. And yeah, I think what the show did really well is capture what it feels like to be donor conceived, but not in like a voyeuristic kind of strange way. I think that sometimes, because donor conception is still fairly modern, and it's definitely becoming a lot more popular than even it was in the 90s, that people can often... There are lots of stories about donor conceived babies, but there aren't many about what happens when you become an adult. And this show did that really, really well. It was like, this is actually what it looks like 30 years down the line. I had a message from someone who is a single mother by choice, has a donor-conceived child. Obviously, the laws have changed slightly. So
yeah, I was going to ask about that. Has the legislation changed recently? Because now it's less... The anonymity is less strict.
So the legislation changed. The reason that the show is made this year is the legislation changed in 2005, that when the donor-conceived person reaches the age of 18, they can find out identifying information about their donor. So obviously 2023 was the first year that those children would be turning 18. So yeah, that has really changed the game, I think. But then it's still the responsibility of the parents to even tell them they're donor conceived in the first place, and still that is kept a secret. And I think my big plea is for parents, if you have a donor conceived child, please tell them. Please tell them, because it doesn't need to be traumatic. It can just be a fact of their life. Families look different. Lots of families look different. You've got single parent families, same sex families, non-nuclear families. You've got so many different types of families that all a child needs to feel is loved, whether that's by their biological parents or not. And yeah, it's really, really important. It's really, really, really important for identity formation to tell them. Because it's incredibly unfair when you don't, I think.
So after all the process, have you considered maybe contacting your donor now that you know more about them?
So it's, at the moment, I've made the decision to not pursue contact. And I said in the show around kind of like wondering whether it was the right thing to do or not. And I think for me personally right now, it's not.
Why is that? How did you come to that conclusion?
So finding out you have 4 siblings is a lot, and I want to make sure I have time to process it. But one thing I think I wanted to kind of be clear about is that personal decision of mine, I don't think should affect a general moral attitude to people that want to. I think it's incredibly important to be able to have access to information and to be able to attempt contact. I have the access for information, and I've decided right now I don't want to attempt contact, but I deserve the access to information, and so does every other donor-conceived person. You have the right to attempt contact, you have the right to information, but you don't have the right to a relationship. That's the really important distinction.
Do you think your decision could change in future?
Yeah, I think it could. Maybe when I have children. I also just think that because everything happens so quickly, I wanted time to be able to process it and time to be able to think, you know, like I don't even know how, it's so hard to think about how to even tackle this, and you're way more likely, I think, to be rejected by a donor than by a half sibling. And you know, the person did it anonymously a long time ago, and I know it's a really hard thing to be able to cope with if you are rejected. I think I'd be okay if I do decide to make contact, all these sort of things.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you to Liam Renouf, and thanks for listening to the Bailiwick Podcast. Keep up with all the latest news by visiting bailiwickexpress.com or reading our sister publication, the JEP. More next week from me, Kelly Frost, and the rest of the team.